She didn't ask how many hours I worked, didn't care how hard I worked, didn't bother asking why I was even here in the first place. No, Karen Whitmore took one look at my face, my age, my skin, and decided I didn't belong. That's how it all started, with one smug woman and her warning taped to my front door. You'd think she might have checked her facts first, but by the time she finally did, we were already in court. And trust me, nobody saw that coming, least of all her. Funny how some people think being young means you're renting or you must be up to something shady. Yeah, that happened. I'm Sarah Hamilton, and just so you know, I'm not your average 23-year-old law grad scraping by in a tiny apartment. Nope, I'm actually the granddaughter of William Hamilton. Yeah, the William Hamilton who founded Oakwood Estates back in 1983 and left me his house at 1247 Maple Lane in his will. Not a purchase, not a lucky find. Just family. I moved in 3 months ago. Barely had time to hang up my degree before I landed on Karen's radar. She's been the HOA president for 3 years, loves the power, and uses it like a club. Her husband runs the local bank, so she acts like she owns the block. Karen started out subtle. Well, as subtle as she gets, showing up with her clipboard, making small talk that was anything but friendly. So, when will your parents be visiting, or does the actual owner know you're living here? I tried to be nice at first. I even offered her lemonade one afternoon while she quizzed me about my arrangement. But you know what I mean? Some people just see what they want to see. Within a week, she'd graduated to standing in my driveway taking pictures of my car, my mailbox, even my trash cans, claiming it was all for her security report. She started sending neighborhood-wide emails about unfamiliar faces and possible security concerns. She never mentioned my name, but it wasn't hard for folks to connect the dots. Suddenly, the neighbors' people who'd smiled at me that first week stopped making eye contact. Mrs. Patterson, 2 doors down, actually crossed the street rather than walk past my house on her evening stroll. I could feel the gossip tightening around me like a noose. The next thing I know, there's a big orange violation notice on my door. Grass too long, $200 fine. I measured it myself, 2.5 inches. The rule is 3 max. I called Karen and she said the HOA's measurement was official and maybe I should learn how to read a ruler. 2 days later, another noticed commercial vehicle parked overnight. Apparently, my Honda Civic looks like a delivery truck to her. Meanwhile, my inbox was filling up with neighbors forwarding Karen's emails and whispering about strange activity. She was laying it on thick. By the 4th week, she was leaving me voicemails demanding I provide proof of income, threatening to expose my so-called fraud, and announcing she'd hired a private investigator. She wasn't going to let up until she'd run me out, or so she thought. The final straw, Karen called the police. She actually reported me for trespassing at my own house. Officer Martinez showed up looking embarrassed, apologizing before he even stepped onto the porch. "Ma'am, we received a call about a squatter," he said, side-eyeing Karen, who was standing out on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, grinning like she'd won the lottery. I invited him in, handed him my driver's license, my deed, my insurance paperwork, everything. Martinez looked it all over and gave me that look like, "Yeah, I figured." Then he turned to Karen and told her if she made another false report, she'd be the one answering questions at the station. Karen stomped off, muttering about conspiracies and corrupt cops. That's when I realized she'd never back down, not unless someone made her. I called my dad that night, he's Judge Robert Hamilton, by the way, and explained everything. He just chuckled and said, "Sarah, your grandfather always said bullies only speak one language. Maybe it's time this woman learned it." That was all I needed to hear. I dove into the HOA records, all the dusty old files my grandfather kept so meticulously. Turns out Karen had been cooking the books and bending the rules for years, targeting whoever she didn't like, changing bylaws without a vote, using HOA money for personal legal bills, and making up rules on the fly just to hassle people. And her own property, 4 dogs instead of 2. Fence over the legal height by half a foot. Her husband's van parked overnight every week. You get the idea. Here's where it gets good. I tracked down Mrs. Thompson, who'd lived there since the beginning. The minute I said I was Bill Hamilton's granddaughter, she grinned ear to ear and said, "Honey, your granddad would have had a field day with this woman. She'd been keeping notes, years of them, on Karen's shenanigans, waiting for someone who'd actually do something." She introduced me to Mr. Rodriguez, who'd caught Karen on video ripping out my flowers, and Linda Park, whose son's sandbox was declared a hazard because Karen didn't like kids playing outside her window. Suddenly, it wasn't just my fight. I had an army. I took everything to the county HOA oversight board. They were floored. Karen had more power than she was legally allowed and was flat out ignoring state HOA regulations. They set up a formal review for the next meeting and told me to bring witnesses. On the day of the meeting, the community center was packed more people than I'd ever seen in one place, all buzzing with tension. Karen swept in like a queen, convinced she had everyone on her side. She started the meeting by showing her so-called evidence against me, blurry photos, copies of my deed she claimed were fake, and emails about my suspicious activity, which for the record was basically checking my mail and watering my roses. Then Mrs. Thompson, bless her, stood up, leaned on her cane, and called me to the front. "Sarah, show them who you are." I pulled out a photo of my grandfather at the neighborhood groundbreaking the master deed with his name on every page, and my own paperwork, probate court documents, the works. I showed the HOA all the records of Karen's abuse, the financial reports, the audio recordings of her threats. But the kicker: proof that she used $200 of HOA money to pay a lawyer to investigate me and harass other residents. The room exploded. People started yelling, sharing their own stories. Mr. Rodriguez played his video of Karen destroying my garden, and Linda Park broke down in tears describing how Karen had bullied her son. Karen tried to shut it all down, saying, "This is outrageous. She's a fraud. She must have forged everything." But I just smiled and told her maybe she should be more careful who she messes with. "My father is Judge Hamilton, and he's very interested in how you've handled HOA money, and the oversight board will be forwarding your records to the district attorney." The vote was called. 41 out of 50 residents raised their hands. Karen was out. She tried to protest, but by then nobody was listening. Mr. Rodriguez had already started a petition to remove her officially and hold new elections. As the meeting ended, people came up to me apologizing for believing Karen's rumors, shaking my hand, telling me how proud my grandfather would have been. Within a week, Karen and her husband put their house up for sale 15% below market, desperate to get out. The orange violation notices vanished. The harassment stopped, and for the first time the neighborhood felt like home. I didn't want to run for HOA president, but the neighbors basically insisted. Mrs. Thompson said, "Your granddad built this place on fairness and respect. You've already shown you'll fight for that." So I agreed, and my first move was to create a grievance committee to review all fines and complaints. We made the finances transparent, recovered the $3,000 Karen had wasted, and spent it on a new playground. The kids went nuts, the parents were grateful, and the vibe just changed overnight. Community barbecues came back. Holiday decorations went up without anyone freaking out, and even Mrs. Patterson started dropping off cookies on Sundays. 6 months later, we held the first William Hamilton Community Day. My dad cut the ribbon on the playground. Mr. Rodriguez's son Daniel, who'd helped design the garden for the event, asked me out, and a year later proposed right there among the roses my grandfather planted decades before. Life has a way of turning on a dime, you know. These days, I'm running my own law practice, helping people fight back against petty tyrants and power-hungry HOAs. Word got around fast. Every time someone calls about another Karen, I think back to those sleepless nights and just smile. Mrs. Thompson, now almost 90, still tells everyone how little Sarah Hamilton saved Oakwood Estates and how her grandfather would have done exactly the same. Real leadership isn't about having power over people. She says it's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. Karen. She ended up pleading guilty to embezzlement and harassment. Court-ordered community service restitution, and her story made the local news a warning to every would-be dictator with a clipboard and a chip on their shoulder. She wanted to prove I didn't deserve my house, but in the end, She lost everything she'd tried to protect. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well, building something better, making sure the bullies of the world know they don't get the last word. Every new resident who moves into Oakwood Estates gets a welcome basket and a copy of my grandfather's Rules, Fairness, Respect, Community First. That's the legacy I protect now. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. So what do you think? Was I right to stand up and fight back? Or should I have just kept my head down and waited for things to blow over? Tell me your thoughts, your own stories about justice, about power, about standing up when it counts. Because in the end, that's what keeps a community strong, not the rules, not the fines, but people who refuse to back down when it really matters.